This land was the engine that made America invincible. But today, its highways only seem to lead outward, away from the mountains that once were our refuge. West Virginia is not just a state on the map. It is the scar of a broken promise, the echo of an industrial symphony that no longer plays, the memory of when being a miner meant building an entire country with hands blackened by dust and chests filled with pride. In the year 1863, while the Civil War tore a nation apart, something extraordinary happened in the Appalachian Mountains. Virginia split, not from hatred between neighbors, but from loyalty to principles that seemed larger than shared blood. The western counties, those where mountains rose like stone cathedrals and rivers ran with the force of freedom, said no. No to slavery, no to the Confederacy, no to abandoning the Union their grandfathers had helped to found. And so, West Virginia was born, the only state forged in the fire of a war between brothers, the 35th state of the American Union. Those men and women did not know that beneath their feet slept the wealth that would fuel the most powerful era in human history. Coal seams ran like dark veins through the mountains, waiting to be discovered, waiting to be the salvation and the curse of generations to come. The first miners arrived with oil lanterns and pickaxes. They descended each morning into the absolute darkness of the earth, trusting only in knowledge passed from father to son about where to strike and how to breathe slowly so the dust would not choke them before their time. The coal companies built entire towns around the mouths of the mines. Wooden houses lined the hillsides like obedient soldiers. Company stores, where miners spent their wages before even touching them, sold food and tools on credit that kept people tied to the land like ivy clings to ancient oaks. But there was something more. There was community. There was the sound of children playing in dirt streets while their fathers emerged at dusk covered in black, unrecognizable except for the whiteness of their smiles when they saw their families waiting for them. By the year 1920, West Virginia produced more than 89 million tons of coal annually. The mines employed more than 130,000 men. Think about that number for a moment. 130,000 fathers descending into darkness every single morning so that a nation could have light and heat. They were not just numbers on a corporate ledger. They were husbands who kissed their wives before dawn without knowing if they would return. They were sons who left school at 14 because a family needed to eat more than it needed dreams. They were immigrants from Italy, Poland, and Hungary who came to these mountains seeking the American promise and found it in the underground brotherhood where the color of your skin mattered less than how quickly you could pull a companion from a collapsing tunnel. West Virginia. Coal traveled on trains that never stopped. It fed the blast furnaces of Pittsburgh, where steel melted and took the shape of beams that would build the skyscrapers of New York. It fed the factories of Detroit, where automobiles were born that would put America on wheels. During World War I, coal from these mountains powered the warships that crossed the Atlantic. During World War II, more than 150 million tons came from the bowels of the Appalachians to become tanks, planes, and munitions. West Virginia did not just participate in the war. West Virginia was the arsenal of democracy before anyone used those grand words. And in the mining towns, there was life. White wooden churches rose on every hill, their bells calling to services where people sang with the same passion with which they worked. On Saturdays, the main streets buzzed with clothing stores, hardware stores, barbershops, where men talked about baseball and unions with equal intensity. A miner could walk down the main street of Welch or Beckley or Logan and know that his work mattered, that without him, America would stop like a clock whose spring has been removed. By 1950, nearly 250,000 people worked directly or indirectly in the coal industry. Union wages allowed them to buy homes, send children to college, dream of vacations to the ocean many had never seen. This was the peak, the mountaintop before the descent began without anyone sounding the alarms in time. Then came betrayal, disguised as progress. Enormous excavators could do in one day the work of 50 men in a week. Mountaintop removal literally blew off the summits with explosives to expose coal seams without the need for tunnels or human hands risking their lives in darkness. It was efficient, it was brutal, and it did not need entire communities of workers. By the year 2000, only 20,000 miners remained. The companies kept extracting coal, perhaps more than ever, but they no longer needed the people of West Virginia to do it. The towns began to die slowly and without ceremony. Stores closed because money no longer circulated. The hardware store where 3 generations bought their tools shuttered its windows with plywood that grayed in the rain. The diner where miners gathered for coffee before the morning shift served its last breakfast to a handful of old men who had nowhere else to go. Churches watched their congregations age without young people arriving to replace them because the young were leaving. They left for Charlotte, for Columbus, for anywhere there was a future that was not caring for the ruins of their grandfather's greatness. Between 1950 and 2020, West Virginia lost nearly 300,000 people. It is the only state in America that has fewer people today than 70 years ago. But betrayal did not come only from machines. It came from decisions in boardrooms 1,000 miles away, where men in suits looked at spreadsheets and decided it was cheaper to extract natural gas elsewhere. It came from environmental policies that were necessary, but implemented without a real plan for the communities that depended on coal. It came from solar and wind energy that promised a cleaner future, but arrived too late to be salvation for 50-year-old miners with destroyed lungs and no skill other than tearing wealth from the earth. It came from companies that took trillions of dollars in resources over a century, and when they left, only holes remained in the mountains and in local economies. When work disappeared, when the dignity of earning bread evaporated, when the sons of miners realized there was no inheritance except the memory of better times, desperation arrived. And with desperation came the pills: OxyContin, Vicodin, fentanyl. By the year 2015, West Virginia had the highest rate of opioid overdose deaths in the entire nation, 42 deaths per 100,000 people. In some counties like McDowell, the figure was double. Pharmacies in towns of 2,000 people received millions of pills per year. It was not an accident. It was extractive capitalism in its cruelest form, taking first the coal and then the hope, and finally the lives themselves. Today, more than 17% of West Virginia's population lives below the federal poverty line. Schools close because there are not enough children to fill the classrooms. Hospitals close because there are not enough patients who can pay. Roads crack and no one comes to repair them because why invest in the infrastructure of a place everyone is leaving? But West Virginia is not empty. There are still 1,800,000 souls living among these mountains. Elderly who refuse to abandon the homes where they raised their families. Veterans who returned from distant wars only to discover the battle at home was against irrelevance. Young people who stay not because there are opportunities, but because they love fiercely these hills that saw them born, these rivers where they learned to fish, these forests that in autumn turn a gold so beautiful it hurts to look at, knowing that beauty does not pay bills or fill stomachs. Walk through North Fork or Bramwell, towns that were once so prosperous they had more millionaires per capita than anywhere east of the Mississippi. Look at the Victorian mansions crumbling because no one can afford to maintain them. Read the names in the hillside cemeteries. Italian names, Slavic names, names that came from distant places seeking the American dream and found it here, in the darkness of the mines, in the light of the communities they built. The mountains are still there, The rivers still run, though some still carry the orange color of acid drainage from abandoned mines. And on the porches of houses still inhabited, people sit at dusk and watch the horizon of blue ridges and remember how it was when these hills did not symbolize loss, but promise. On a cool October morning, when the mist hangs low in the valleys and the sun breaks through the gaps in the ridges, the light falls on these mountains the same way it did when the first settlers arrived, the same way it did when the mines were full of men and hope. The deer still come down to drink from the streams at dawn. The black bears still wander through the hollows where company houses once stood. Nature is reclaiming what industry took, slowly, patiently, as if waiting for the people to remember that this land was here long before the coal and will be here long after the last memory of prosperity fades. Perhaps West Virginia is the warning America did not want to hear, that you cannot build greatness on the backs of a region and then abandon it when you find cheaper methods or more accessible resources. That communities are not disposable just because the industries that sustain them become obsolete. That people deserve more than to be the temporary fuel of the machine of progress. That loyalty should run both ways, and when a place gives everything it has to build a nation, the nation owes more than forgetfulness in return. This is the state America forgot, but that still beats in the mountains. It beats in the hearts of those who stayed and in the memory of those who left, but never stopped calling these hills home. It beats in the stories grandfathers tell about when hands blackened by coal built the most powerful nation in the world. Tell us in the comments if you knew these times, if your father or grandfather went down into the mines, if you remember when West Virginia was not synonymous with poverty, but with pride. Because as long as someone remembers, as long as someone tells these stories, West Virginia will not have disappeared completely. It will only be waiting for America to turn around and acknowledge the debt it can never repay.